This is going to be an informal question and answer session. Those of you who intend to ask questions from both brothers and sisters, they can come to the front. Those who do not see the possibility of asking any question, they can stay in the back. And would you please make sure that your kids are not running around? So, I repeat, those of you who intend to ask any question, you can come forward. And those who do not want to ask questions, they can remain where they are. And I'm going to ask either through papers or by hand. But for the time being, we start with a few of these questions that I have, and then we address them. One question from the audience, one of these papers. So we will be able... And could I remind everyone who's writing down the question, if these questions are some jurisprudential issue to do with fiqh, that you can go to the book of your scholar and find the answer. Don't write the question down. It's easy. One of the problems that we have in these meetings is that people use it while there are other options of gaining that knowledge. You can go to the books of your marja and find out what his view is regarding a particular thing. So don't ask when it comes to tahara and nijasa or ghusl or something else. These are things that you can do by going back to your own marja's book. So let us start. Sisters, please. Khanuma lutfan. Khanuma lutfan. اونایی که نمیخوان سوال کنن از خانوما لطفاً تقاضا میکنید اونایی که نمیخوان سوال کنن سکوت رو مراعات کنن و اونایی که میخوان سوال کنن میتونن بیان جلو بشینن و سوال کنن. در ضمن اونایی که نمیخوان سوال کنن میتونن از بچه‌هایی که در اطرافشون هستن از دویدن این طرف اون طرف جلوگیری کنن. Let's start with the sisters. One question from the sisters, then I'll go to one of the paper questions, then I come to the brothers, one question from the brothers, and then I go to the papers again. Okay, who's going to pose the first? You don't need to look around, go ahead. You want to take this so that I don't have to repeat the question.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is regarding educating our children. Homeschooling. When homeschooling is not an option for our children. Some of us look for alternative education in charter schools, magnet schools, and or just typical public schools. A lot of the 10-10 schools, those that rate 10 for all their test scores and everything, don't really practice the type of discipline. They also encourage a lot of equality among every type of lifestyle, etc. So some of us have chosen alternative schools. But with that also comes some other challenges, and one that we're facing is that the school that I have my children and some others have their children in is a really good school in a lot of ways, but they're also teaching religion about Adam and Eve and their views and all that. And I wanted to know, is it okay if we continue this with our children? In our eyes so far, it's better than the public school, but we're not sure where this is going to lead for the children at such a young age. How will this influence? We keep the open conversation with our children about this is what they say, this is what we believe. But when will it become damaging, or will it become damaging, or maybe make them stronger?
Well, let's look at this education system in the West in general, but United States in particular. There were days in which you had three options. Number one was the public school, number two the private schools, or if you didn't like either of them, it was homeschool. When you started your question with it's not an option, I would disagree with it. If there is enough planning, there are a number of families in the United States that the issue of homeschooling has been an option for them, and they've deliberately chosen it to be an option. But one has to be aware that if you decide to go that route, it requires a large degree of planning and commitment. But it can be done. By the way, it's not just within, say, the Shia or Muslim community. I have seen Jewish Orthodox that they have opted for homeschooling. Christians, particularly Catholics, that they have opted for homeschooling. And by now there are websites that, particularly parents, that they do homeschooling, because this is an option that we are considering. If I stay in Colorado or in Denver, in Boulder, that might be the option. There are websites that one could access where there are parents that are doing homeschooling. They share their ideas and the resources. So I would advise at this stage not to take it out of the equation. So you can research and find out what these people are doing and what are the resources available. But in Colorado, at least Boulder, they encourage this part of the education system. They encourage homeschooling as an option, as a viable option for the parents. The second part of the question is, should we or shouldn't we put our children in schools or in educational institutions in which, apart from one or two issues that we may disagree with, issue of religion, their interpretation, their reading, etc., the other issues is something that we can work with. Before I answer this question, I really need to outline that as parents, irrespective of whether we find, even if we find the ideal school in the United States, we still require to work and support the children. Definitely the load will be more when it's a secular school, but has no tendency towards religion or anything. There is more work. I remember Dr. Karim Siddiqui, who used to be the head of the Muslim Parliament in England. He did a research, this is many years ago, a couple of decades ago, and he did a research, Muslim Parliament did a research on the effect of secular school on children, Muslim children. The conclusion reached was that for every hour that a Muslim child spends in a secular school, the parents need to spend 2 hours to simply wash and adjust them to the values that we have. And I don't think under normal circumstance it would be viable for any parents to say, well, if they go to school 8 hours, you have to work with them 16 hours at home. So the reason why they did that, to encourage the parents to search for an alternative way. One of the outcomes was in London, at least we had 6 or 7 Muslim schools that were developed, north, south, east at least. I don't think you have that opportunity here. Neither the wealthy and not the organization is there to support. There were philanthropists, Muslim philanthropists, that came out and they said, okay, Let's do a research, how much is going to cost, £1 million, we invest, let the community benefit, and then gradually they benefited from there. The second part of the question is, now if we find a school that say 90% of the ideas we agree, and 10% we don't, there is a concept, a principle in usul that الضرورات تقدر بقدرها. Exceptional circumstances requires exceptional rules. And these exceptional rules would make provision for these kind of unique circumstances. But constantly mindful for that extra 10%, I need to work extra. It will be definitely much more advantageous to send the kids to a school that you can trust 90% of their curriculum, and you only have issues with 10%, then you can structure your life and say, okay, how do I deal with the children, short of going to homeschooling, where I can organize plans with my partner, say, okay, this is what it has to be done. It requires a little bit of sacrifice, it requires adjustment, but it can be done. So, as far as the ruling regarding the permissibility under what we call exceptional circumstances, which this is an exceptional circumstance, then it's okay. But again, my advice is to be mindful of the extra responsibility once you have identified the area where you need to focus. And you have to constantly talk to your children that, look, this is one point of view. We may differ. And this is why we were different. And give them the benefit. Now we're going back to the point that we raised during the conversation, that we really need, it's not just a concept of self, educating ourselves to get ready when it comes to these children, when they ask questions and when we see certain things, to respond to it. But there is nothing that I personally have researched it, there is nothing within this that says no, because it is an exceptional circumstance. I know that Imam Ali alayhi salam loved Bibi Fatima, but why did he have multiple wives then? Well, number one, during the life of Fatima, he did not have any other wives. It was after that he decided, after the death of the Bibi Fatima, that was going to get married. And the concept of what we call multiple wives requires a really long philosophical conversation, and to explain that this was a cultural basis at the time, and we cannot impose contemporary values on values of 1,400 years ago. So, but at least the first part of the question is not correct. Imam did not marry anybody else in the same manner that the Prophet did not marry anybody else as long as Khadija was alive. Imam Ali did not marry anybody else as long as Fatima was alive. What happened after, it's the circumstance that we have to analyze. Despite saying that don't ask issue of haram, najis and so on, there are 3 questions so far that has come in regarding why dog is najis. These are explained in jurisprudential books that we can return to them and ask the opinion of your scholar. We go to the brothers. Go ahead. Before then we come to you next.
فارسی هم میگم.
Either Farsi, English.
اولا من می‌خواستم از شما تشکر کنم به خاطر حضورتون امسالتی مسجد ما برخلاف آقای
I will translate.
سوالی که داشتم شاید یه خورده توضیحش طولانی باشه در مورد اختلافات شیعه و سنی، نه جوابش شاید در مورد ریشه اختلافات شیعه و سنیه. میگم حضرت علی فکر کنم قریب 20 سال خودشون بنا به روایت میگم خونه نشین بودن و نمیخواستن دامن بزنن به این اختلافات. خواستم چطور شد شما توضیح دادیم که بین شیعه و سنی، شیعه و سنی نوع بینش و نگرشمون به دین اسلام می‌خوره متفاوته، اما ما در عمل نماز خوندنمون یه خورده هم فرق می‌کنه، وضو گرفتنمون فرق می‌کنه، حتی اذانمون فرق می‌کنه. خواستم ببینم این ریشه‌هاش از کجا شروع شد و به نظرتون چه راهکارهایی هست که بشه اینا رو هم نزدیک کرد؟ ما مثلا ایام
میخواید من این جواب به انگلیسی بدم یا به فارسی بدم؟
نه انگلیسی بگیم. فقط یه چیز دیگه هم که بود، مثلا ما ایام ولادت حضرت رسول که میشه همش میگیم ما باید وحدت شیعه و سنی باشه، دم از اون میزنیم. بعد ایام عاشورا و محرم که میشه تو زیارت عاشورا شروع میکنیم به لعن و نفرین به چیزایی که حالا برای سنی یه خود ارزش داره.
For the brother sitting in the back, the question is, what is the essence or the reasons for the Shia-Sunni differences, and whether this can be resolved in one way. This is the gist of the question. As far as Shia-Sunni differences, yes, we have differences vis-a-vis interpretation of history, as I explained last night. We have differences as far as understanding theological understanding. The kalam of Shia is slightly different from Ash'ari kalam and Mu'tazili kalam. And also we have some jurisprudential aspect, which is the views of, say, Abu Hanifa vis-a-vis views of the Shia point of view. But the main reason or the factor that has led to these conflicts has been always political. It has nothing to do with the theological issues, as we see it today, these days. The Shia-Sunni theological differences are being used by individuals that have a clear political agenda that they want to divide the Muslim community. It's been right from the beginning. The Muawiyah's attempt to annihilate and kill those who supported Ali because it was a political issue. Yazid's attempt to do the same thing, it was a political issue because they were considered to be a threat to the power base that it is. And we see similar kind of things in Ben al-Abbas, the rest of Bani Umayyah, Ben al-Abbas, and the other powers that come after. So I don't see, if there were no political components to the whole thing, the theological issues could be resolved, or at least we can reach a point in which we agree to disagree. As it used to be up to at least 30 years ago, grand scholars, the Shia scholars, would go to Saudi Arabia, which was considered to be a Salafi country, and it still is. And these grand scholars would sit down and debate various issues. Al-Muraja'at, which is a book written primarily on the issue of Shia-Sunni between a Lebanese scholar and a head of Al-Azhar. It was part of the debate. The debate was open. There was a degree of respect. There was a degree of respect for each other's point of view. Once political agenda is imposed and these differences are used, then it takes totally a different shape. In the case of Iraq, for example, these days, which is as a consequence of American occupation, when you break the fabric of the community, and people have to start drawing the boundaries and defining who that they are, then the old animosities will come in. Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Syria, and a few others. I would not consider the differences, the animosity purely based on the theological issue or jurisprudential issues, because at the end of the day you can look at few traditions. Even within Shia scholars there are disagreement as to whether one particular group of hadith are valid or not valid. So we can agree to disagree, or one particular jurisprudential view was acceptable or not acceptable. What we need to do is try to control the environment, or particularly the political environment, so that those who have agendas outside the views of the majority, not to give them the opportunity to come forward. The issue of Ashura and the life of the Holy Prophet, everyone accepts that the life of the Holy Prophet embodied the concept of unity that exists in Islam. This is why everybody talks about it. But during Ashura, particularly in the last 10 years, we have seen Shia community deliberately targeted because of their commemoration of Karbala. Yesterday in Baghdad, Shias that were on the way to go to Karbala, their cars were blown, mosques are attacked, processions are attacked, etc., etc. The so-called Al-Qaeda, which is US-made in Iraq and Saudi-supported, 3 weeks before the month of Muharram, has given a warning to all Iraqis that Yazid is our leader, and Hussein stood against Yazid, then he is our enemy, and we have the right, and this is on internet, we have the right to target any Shia, any procession that commemorate Hussein as a legitimate soft target. Yesterday, the Mufti of Saudi Arabia has given a fatwa that the Muslims are obligated to celebrate this day, the 10th of Ashura. Celebrate means not just any kind of celebrate. Be happy and go out and even fast as a thanksgiving for the event that took place on this day. Under this, which primarily could be interpreted as, again, another political step, but under such circumstance, it would be very difficult. You just go to internet, put Shia on YouTube, and see the filth that comes out of the Sunni scholars. What Muslim Brotherhood did in Egypt, what others are doing somewhere else. Under such circumstance, the concept of unity is it's nothing more than a vanity, and it's something exists in theory. It's not going to take place in reality until these political gains supported by the outsiders to divide the country. Shimon Peres, to give you another example, 3 months ago, Shimon Peres, the Zionist leader, had an interview with whom? Al Jazeera. And he made it clear that we means the Zionists, by ourselves, if Iran moves towards nuclear warhead, we may not be able to stop Iran from getting there. But we may be able to do it by organizing an alliance with the Sunni community, Sunni leaders in the world, and he puts the finger Saudi Arabia as #1 partner. They have already succeeded. As soon as the United States said, well, we are going to organize some kind of conversation with Iran to see whether we can get some a resolution, Bandar bin Sultan, the chief, security chief, goes to Tel Aviv, has a meeting in Istanbul with the head of the security in Tel Aviv, and goes there. How can they coordinate the wealth of Saudi Arabia with the military of the Zionists against another Muslim? And then we talk about unity. It's simply not possible. The only thing we can do is to be aware of the differences, express respect for somebody else's point of view, we agree to disagree, but be mindful of these realities. I remember many years ago at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, there was, I think early 1990, there was a conference on Palestine. And there was a Palestinian professor who came and gave a talk as well as presented a paper. And his attack was venomous against the United States in particular. So I was curious to find out how he justifies it. And he said, Imam, if the helicopter that kills you says on it, made in the United States, if the tank that comes and destroys your house is made in the United States, if the M6 gun that is used by the Zionist soldiers to kill you and your family are made in the United States, If the bombs that are used to destroy your family and community is made in the United States, it's very easy for the Palestinian to link the two together. The source of the pain and atrocities are this particular country. Now, if we want to use that as a metaphor, if my brothers are being killed or my sisters as they walk the street for nothing else but because they say Hussein, if your mosques are attacked because you say Hussein, if your congregation attacked because you say Hussein, even if you don't do anything else, you're bombed and killed and assassinated because you are a Shia, the notion that, well, we have to talk and somehow resolve our differences and get to some kind of unity is wishful thinking. Let me be frank. We have survived so far despite the atrocities that have been committed against the Shias right from the moment that Saqifa took place up to now. We extend our hands of friendship and brotherhood, but we are being rejected all the time. These are unique times that people have to express how they are. Unity doesn't mean that somehow we have to give up how we feel about certain events, historical events. It is possible, but not under this circumstance that we are in. Any attempt by, whether it's Iran, Iraq, or somewhere else, to organize, say, Wahda conferences, the unity conferences, remains in purely, how can I put it, theoretical level, hypothetical. Beyond certain scholars coming in, delivering a sermon and so on and going back, nothing would take place, and some publications. Remember, last year Morsi was invited for one of these conferences. Before he goes to Tehran, he goes to Riyadh and gets the order from the Saudi king and the Mufti and comes in, puts the paper down, Assalamu alaikum ya Abu Bakr. Before he says even Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, I mean, let's be realistic. We would like this to happen. Ideally, it should happen, because we have so much in common. A religious minister at the mosque, the biggest mosque in Colorado, I worked with him, a Syrian guy that he's gone to Atlanta, worked with him on interfaith. Simply because he has contact with a Shia scholar, he was dismissed. And then you want me, brother, to come and talk about or do something about unity. Forgive me, sisters and brothers, there is an expression in English says, you need two to tango. Both parties must be ready for this. You can't constantly come out, I would like unity, and constantly reject it. Let's face the music. What's the concept of infallibility? By the way, if you are a Farsi speaker, there are a number of books that you can access and read on the concept of Isma. Simply put, infallibility states that our Imams deliberately, not it was they were made, because if somebody believes that our Imams were made infallible, they made Ma'soom, it's no kind of benefit for them or no role for us. If you are mechanically created like Malaika and like angels, you don't commit any sins. The fact that they are role models is a fact. It's a deliberate choice, willing choice, exercising your free will, but directed in a manner that you avoid sin. This is the concept of infallibility from a Shia perspective, or read Islam. What we are being accused that, well, we believe that somehow God created them infallible. No, there is no such thing as God creating anyone infallible. The only group of creation that God created infallible are the angels. They are inherently, structurally such that they cannot think about sin or commit sins. Everybody else has the free will. The way they exercise their free will that's the basis for punishment and reward and the concept of justice in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that was the reason where I challenged the reading, that particular type of reading within the whole Sina Zaniya and so on, that it goes against the grain of action being the framework for judgment. They have decided, they have got the free will, they have decided willingly to exercise and control their life where they avoided all sins. Because they have done that, then they become the role model, the infallible that we have to look up to. Sisters. And then we come back to you, sister.
This was a question I had posed a few nights ago, but it's also relevant to what we just discussed about education and school systems, especially secular school systems. And my question was in reference to a growing trend and environment that's not only in schools but in the workplace, in general social media and everyday interactions. Is the trend in the support or in the acceptance of homosexuality, and how, as Muslims, what kind of counter arguments do we have that are more sophisticated? Because it seems like their arguments continue to become, on the preface or on the surface it's sophisticated, but I feel that so many of us are ill-equipped in providing a proper, thorough defense against it.
Unfortunately, this is not the one, it could be one of the issues, but this is not the issue. We have a conflict between two ontological bases, two worldviews. One is a secular worldview that has its own unique approach to the world, and uses certain path for its own epistemology and gaining knowledge. And there is another ontology or worldview that is religiously oriented and God-centered and bases itself on what we call the divine laws. This is the conflict. Within this conflict, there are a number of issues that comes up. This notion of homosexuality, the individualism, the issue of history, the role of religion, etc., etc., etc. I think where we need to focus is the root of the cause. We go back to what the sister said. How can we approach or teach our children or develop a plan for our children that would address, at least avoid confrontation with these kind of issues at the beginning of their life until they become adequately equipped to respond to it? And these are primarily alternatives that bypasses the secular system. The secular system, you can't challenge it, whether it's part of sex education. I mean, this homosexuality comes under the sex education. Sex education comes under the approach to whole education, and the whole education comes under the whole view of whether the education has to be centered on so-called post-enlightenment or religiously organized. I think at this stage, with the absence of a clear structure within our community that could compensate for that, which means, say, a religious organization, religious schools, etc., etc., one has to be mindful of the challenges that our children have and avoid putting them into a direct confrontation before they become fully equipped for it, which means right from the beginning trying to avoid, I take my kids to school, I go to the principal, I don't want my children to go into X, Y, Z classes. That's number one. And I explain my point of view. As soon as in another class there is a mention about religion and so on, I write a letter to the teacher and say, my daughter just came home with this view, I would like to to be allowed to come back and explain my point of view that may counter your point of view or may disagree with it. These are points. Once you challenge the system constantly, you can do it, but still the risk is there. The other alternative is, after a certain age, say 5, 6, I have to opt for the protection of my children for home school or for an alternative school, where the challenge is not as much or as bad as we have it in the secular school. Whether you find out, for example, there are some schools or some even Catholic schools that share with us their abhorrence of certain teaching, or secular teaching. How about putting them for a while over there, where until the foundation becomes strong, but you need to work. Go ahead.
But I guess what I'm trying to say, beyond that point where you're at the university and it's become very dogmatic, you know, you're a bigot automatically if you say anything that what type of academic arguments, I'm sure there exist, that can
Yes.
poke holes in their own theories.
Once the foundation is right, the kids can go up and protect themselves. At least that's number one. This is part of the upbringing, where you not only try to protect them, you try to foresee the future challenges and teach them not only the philosophical, the educational basis, the language to be able to stand up and defend. There are some schools that they do that, some religious organizations that organize. Ask a child, I went to a school in Michigan where they give a particular topic to a child and or future boys and girls, and they ask them to stand in front of the parents and use that topic and defend it using a clear and concise argument and reasoning for it. It's not something that, even if you put these kids in the best of environment, it's a technique that they have to learn. And this is where your role is. You can do that at home. Give a topic, even on a simple basis, right from the beginning. When you teach your children about Usul al-Din, concept of Tawheed, let them stand up and talk about Tawheed. And then you say, okay, what about if somebody says this? Let's see a child's reasoning, counter-reasoning. It can be, this character and the capability can be developed. When you don't develop it, you can't expect a child being dropped into the deep end and say swim. They can look and protect themselves because you have given them enough information to just stand still, but not to defend themselves. This is a totally different technique. You can learn about it, the religious organization can have it, schools can have it, etc., etc. It can be done, but it requires a thorough education. That's number one. To be injected free education, to let them think, could become critical thinkers. But right from the beginning, direct rather than impose. Allow them the freedom to ask questions. But you always playing the devil's advocate, forcing them to go beyond certain limits. That's how they become critical thinkers, and if they have the power of the language, then they will be able to use it as they go. You want to follow?
I think maybe I didn't make myself entirely clear.
Well, yeah, we can, later on we can discuss it. Dua, why do we put our hand, during dua, why do we put our hands in front of us? Well, it's just to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly to answer our prayers. There's nothing specific about it. You can, prayer is a kind of dua that, but in a particular structure that you have to drop your hand. It's not necessarily, but it's some cultural issues. Brothers, your question. Your question.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My question was, what do you feel is the ideal leadership structure for Islamic centers here in the U.S.? And typically, organizations have like a board of trustees, and they may invite or hire like a scholar like yourself to come and be a resident alim. I guess I've just heard anecdotally, that sometimes there are different arrangements, within the leadership there. So, what do you think is the ideal structure that sort of balances sort of the authority of the scholar, and the one that's most knowledgeable, and also sort of the input from community members and such, and then people who are helping support financially and all that kind of stuff?
Well, a typical structure, typical organization, Shia organization, or even Muslim organization, requires the coming together of a number of factors for them to be able to deliver the message and succeed. The organizational structure is necessary. Management structure is necessary. There should be a plan or blueprint that clearly defines the organizational structure as far as their their goals, objectives, etc. In the absence of what we define in our theological reading, the Imam, the infallible Imam, consultation must take place between various individuals that are qualified enough to be able, and representative of the community, to be able to come and have conversation. But no perfect organizational structure can take place or can deliver an Islamic center from, say, ground zero to somewhere else if there are other components which are not there. Finance is a critical issue. Because if you're going to have a plan, you bring the structure together. The organizational structure is there, the management structure is there, but their hands are tied. They are incapable of fulfilling any of their responsibilities because the community in general is not prepared to adhere to its responsibility of supporting financially. From an Islamic point of view, we have, at least Shia point of view, we have a concept of khums, which is 1/5 of your net profit at the end of the year. Had or if all the rich individuals or anybody who works and has extra money adheres to this principle, our community would be the richest community in the world. The problem is, and normally people come and criticize the Islamic centers for their inability or ineffectiveness, but when you ask them, okay, well, part of the inability or ineffectiveness is financial. And you are earning $1 million a year, and you can save $50,000 out of your tax. I mean, there are ways of even making contribution to the center without even going into the tax system, into the home system, the tax. Tax experts say that according to the IRS's ruling, you have the power to give 10% of your tax, maximum 10% of your tax, to a religious or a charitable organization of your choice. So as you draw up your taxes, you can identify Islamic Center of X as the recipient of your 10% contribution. You are going to pay this money to the government anyway. But why can't you use it for the Islamic Center before you even discuss homes? So it's not just the management style, the structural style, or anything else. There are a number of factors that must come together, and so that the center begins to function in a real step until it gets to the ideal. I don't think we can make a sudden jump from nothing into an ideal structure for our community. It has to be a gradual process, but certainly it requires the coming together of a number of factors. Management, clearly defined structure, the financial issue, planning, I have repeatedly mentioned it in the English lectures, that if you ask any Islamic center, this is where we are now, where do you want to be in 10 years from now? There is no clear answer whatsoever. Well, let's get over the month of Muharram and then we think about it. Or let's finish month of Ramadan and then let's think about it. There is no clear planning. And even if they have it, then comes the absence of a number of other factors here that literally paralyzes the whole institution. But there are some communities that are making an effort. A successful community needs the coming together of all of its members. The intellectuals must understand their responsibility. Those who have financial benefit must understand their responsibility. Those that have the physical ability may not have the other two. They have a responsibility. Others that may have some unique benefit. By the way, this is not targeted towards the brothers or the sisters. Ultimately, the shared responsibility. Remember the discussion that I had? It's a plain salvation. It's plain. Everyone moves together. So, if we are lacking one of these components, we are not going to get to the ideal. Particularly critical components like the financial. When there are ways of dealing with it, most people simply don't pay their homes. Is playing the game of chess forbidden, and if so, why? I mean, this is a jurisprudential issue, but I will give you some background to it. The chess, see, there are some rulings that affected certain issues that in the past were considered to be haram, and then the scholars changed their view because hurma, or when something is forbidden or not forbidden, or allowed or not allowed, based on its context. We have similar ideas regarding music. Music might have been played in a unique circumstance for a particular reason. This is why the scholars said it is haram. If the context changes, then there is nothing specific as far as, in the case of music, the three components of the musical instrument, the lyric and the place where it's being played, coming together. Chess is the same. It used to be part of the game played by, say, the rulers of the time, be it Bani Umayyah or Bani al-Abbas or something else. Because of the association with them, it was considered to be anything that links to them. It's not. But from the moment that chess became a mental game, it's nothing to do with, say, Bani Umayyah, Taghut, or somebody else. A mental game, it's a game. Then people reflected on the change of context, and there are a number of scholars that said it's okay, you can play it, but as long as it doesn't require a gambling or anything of that sort. There are a number of what I call classical or traditional scholars, like Ayatollah Sistani, that they still believe that it's not allowed. Within the Shirazi brothers, there is at least this view prevails, unless they have changed their point of view. But there are some that rely on one or two traditions, and they say this is haram, and it is in an absolute sense. But I would disagree. There are a number of other scholars, contemporary scholars, that would disagree, and as long as it's being played as simply a mental game, there is nothing abhorrent and nothing against it. Come back to the sisters. There's a sister next to me.
من سوال داشتم از قرآن سوره انعام 2 تا از آیه ها یکی آیه شماره 11 هست که میخونم قل سیروا فی الارض ثم انظروا کیف کان عاقبة المکذبین. من نمیدونم، خواستم بدونم که آیا این آیه در زمان حال ما این دوره زمانی آیا مصداقی داره که این مکذبین کیا هستن؟
میخواید به زبان فارسی بگم یا به زبان
انگلیسی؟
نگاه کنید خانم، ما در قرآن یک سری قوانینی رو خداوند به عنوان سنت الله ذکر میکنه که اینا قانون الهی غیر قابل تغییر. برای اینکه بشر این قوانین رو یاد بگیره یا لااقل بفهمه، سیر تاریخی به عقب و بگیم سیر طولی و عرضی، سیر طولی به عقب و سیر عرضی در دنیا یه سری مسائل رو برای ما روشن. مثلا تمدن‌های گذشته چه شکلی از بین رفته. شما در برابر تخت جمشید که وای میسید میتونید یه نگاهی از تخت جمشید بگیرید که خب این منظره بسیار زیبایی است، مسئله دوران تمدن ایرانی حرفاست. اما یه سوال دیگه هم میتونید بکنید، چرا اینا از بین رفتن و چه شکلی شد که اینا از بین رفتن؟ یا جلو ساختمان‌هایی رو یا چیزهایی رو که یونانی‌ها درست کردن در کشورهای مختلف میتونید وایسید همین سوال رو. دو، در زمین مسافرت کردن در زمین یکی از راه‌هایی است که بشر میتونه یاد بگیره از برخوردهای دیگران، علت شکست بعضی از اقوام، از بین رفتن بعضی از اقوام دلیلش چیه. حالا این مکذب هر کسی رو میتونه باشه. در قانون یه وقتی ما در یک زمان معین میخوایم در نظر بگیریم، یه وقتی به عنوان یک تئوری کلان اسمشو بذاریم. وقتی به عنوان تئوری کلان شد، هر کسی که برخلاف روش و سنت الهی بره جلو، این به عنوان مکذب اسمشو بذاریم. بنابراین خیلی راحت میشه تاریخ درسی رو به ما بده برای کسانی که حاضر نشدن در برابر خدا سرخم کنن یا اینکه اطاعت کنن یا اوامر و دستورات الهی رو تکذیب کردن یا انجام بدن. بنابراین این بحث مسئله درس تاریخ یکی از مسائل بسیار مهمیه که ما داریم. مرحوم مطهری کتابی داره به نام اسلام، به نظرم اسلام و تاریخ یا تاریخ در اسلام. این مجموعه مقالات ایشون بود. من موقعی که ایران بودم دیدم که درباره همین مسئله بحث تاریخ در اسلام یعنی چی و چه امتیازاتی داره. و یک سری از این روایاتی رو داریم و یک سری از این آیات رو ایشون استدلال می‌کنه. چرا؟ همین الان هم وقتی ما مسافرت میکنیم با سوالاتی که ما مطرح میکنیم برای خودمون در برابر جامعه‌های مختلفی که قرار میگیریم برای ما روشن میکنه که بالاخره جامعه وقتی که بر روی کفر یا حالا ظلم قرار گرفت که این خودش یه نوع تکذیب دستور الهیه، بالاخره سقوط میکنه. بالاخره سقوط میکنه. این درسی است که ما میتونیم از تاریخ بگیریم یا عبرتی است که میشه که از تاریخ.
آیه 116 هست.
همون سوره
بله همون سوره. میگه و ان تطع اکثر من فی الارض یضلوک عن سبیل الله یتبعون الا الظن و ان هم الا یخرصون، که اگر بیشتر کسایی که در این زمین هستن، این ترجمه، پیروی کنی تو را از راه خدا گمراه میکنن، آنان جز از گمان خود پیروی نمیکنن و جز به حدس و تخمین نمیپردازن. من یه جایی تفسیر از این آیه بود، استنباط که این کرده بودن این بود که از این نتیجه میگرفتن که حالا یه بحثی مثل دموکراسی نمیشد کرد که بگیم ما بیایم رأی همه رو بگیریم و ببینیم اکثریت چی میخوان اون انجام بدیم. اگه طبق این آیه میگفتن اگه این کار بکنیم شما به نتیجه غلط میرسید.
نگاه کنید خانم، بحثی که در این آیه مطرحه، اولا باید مقدماتش کاملا روشن بشه که بفهمیم موضوع بحث کجاست. در مسائل عقیدتی رأی اکثریت، یعنی در مسئله انتخاب حق و باطل، رأی اکثریت مطرح نیست. یقین شخصی شماست با استدلالی که باید برای خودتون داشته باشید. ولذا امیرالمومنین صلوات الله علیه و آله در نهج البلاغه اشاره میکنه که اگر تمام دنیا به یک طرف بره اما ادله کافی برای اینکه شما را قانع کنه که حق کجاست یک طرف دیگه باشه، عدد مبنا نیست. مسئله تشخیص حق و باطل. حالا اگر تمام دنیا تشخیص باطل رو دادن و من تنها کسی بودم که به نظرم این روش صحیح هست، معناش این نیست چون اکثریت، این همون بحثی است که بعضی از آقایون شیعه ها در اقلیت قرار گرفتن چون سنی ها اکثریت دارن، ما هم دنبال سنی ها بریم. چرا این کارو نمی‌کنیم که یه وحدتی ایجاد بشه؟ بحث در مسئله حق و باطل، در مسائل عقیدتی مسئله عدد مطرح نیست. یعنی ما یکی کوانتیتیو کوالیتیو داریم، این دو تا در برابر هم دیگه است. اونی که برای من مهمه که برای ما روشن بکنه اینی که ادله خودمون رو در استدلالای خودمون کاملا روشن باشیم و روی اون استدلال بریم جلو. حالا چه دیگران در این مسئله مطابقت بکنن چه نکنن. مسئله دموکراسی و مسئله رأی اکثریت اصلا امکان نداره در مسائل دنیایی شما رأی تمام مردم رو جمع کنید در کنار هم. امکانش نیست. حتی ارسطو که نظریه به اصطلاح پولیتیکس خودش و افلاطون ارسطو که در فلسفه یونان نظریه پولیتیکس رو مطرح میکنن که این دموکراسی از اونجا از در منطق غربی از اونجا شروع میشه، کاملا به خصوص ارسطو بر علیه دموکراسی صحبت میکنه. اصلا این منطق غلطیه. این عبارتش is a mob's rule که یک گروه معین چون در اکثریت هستن، نگاه کنید فرق بین اکثریت و حق این دو تا مسئله جداگانه است. این عبارت ارسطو اینه که میگه چون اکثریت هستن معناش این نیست که اینا بر حق ممکنه یک کاملا از اکثریت جدا بشه. در وقتی که ما در یک شرایطی قرار میگیریم که مسئله به اصطلاح سیستم حکومتی دسترسی به علم واقعی نداره، امام معصوم نیست، تمام علم هایی که در دست ما هست به عنوان علم ظاهریه. یعنی شما محققین چون همه خطا ممکنه بکنن، اشتباه بکنن، همه محققین نظریه علم ظاهریه. شما کتاب های رساله عملی رو بردارید باز کنید، اولین صفحهش مال هر آقایی کاملا این آقا نظریه خودش رو شرح میده که من آخرین تحقیق خودم کردم، به نظر من این یک تحقیق درستی است، والله العالم. والله العالم، این که خدا میدونه علم واقعی کجاست. در علم ظاهری احتمال خطا زیاد است. مسئله شورا و مشورت و گروه کنار هم دیگه اومدن احتمال خطا رو یک خورده کم میکنه. ما رو به یقین 100% نخواهد رسوند، اما احتمال خطا رو یک خورده کم میکنه. به خصوص به سیستمی که حاضر باشه در واقعا گوش بده و همکاری کنه، نه اینکه نظر من و هیچ یا اینکه هیچ. دموکراسی به اون مفهوم اصلیش که مطرح شد اینه که ما برای اینکه بتونیم یک سیستمی رو داشته باشیم که جوابگوی مشکلات زندگی ما باشه، وقتی که غرب خودش رو از منبع وحی جدا کرد، یک سیستم دیگر رو میخواست که بتونه جایگزین اون باشه. اون سیستم اینه که هر چی بیشتر مردم میشینن درباره با هم دیگه صحبت میکنن، که این بحثی است که در اواسط قرن 17 با لاکس با هابز اینها شروع شد، بعدم در قرن بعدیش روسو و دیگران دنبالش گرفتن تا اومد به قرن فلسفه امروز. ما یه سیستم دیگه رو میخوایم که بشینیم با هم دیگه صحبت بکنیم، شاید با صحبت کردن و کانسالتیشن و تبدیل آرا اکسچنج نظریات ما بتونیم احتمال خطاهامون رو در زندگی کم کنیم که منجر به جنگ و به وایلنس بشه. این مسئله با مسئله عقیده و حق و باطل یه مسئله کاملا مجزا است. ولذا در مسئله اکثریت، اگر اکثریت به عنوان منطق برای تعیین حق بشه، اون همون جواب ارسطو که اصلا به درد یا قول امیرالمومنین یا دیگر. اگر نه به عنوان یه سیستمی که ما بتونیم کنار هم دیگه بشینیم صحبت کنیم، راه اشتباه ها رو در زندگیمون بگیریم هیچ مسئله نیست. و مشکل اینجاست که خود کلمه دموکراسی در تعبیر غربی الان اون دموکراسی مال 300 سال قبل نیست. دموکراسی الان به صورت یه معنای دیگه رو پیدا کرده، یه سیستم کاملا جداگانه است که بایستی اون رو بازم مثل سیستم سکولاریسم یا مسائل دیگه رو در نظر داشته باشه. سوالی دارید؟ سوالی که هست اینه که پولهایی رو که مصرف مراکز اسلامی میشه آیا احتیاج دارن که از مراجع تقلید سوال کنن تا بتونن از خمس و زکاتشون حساب بشه؟ بستگی داره که این سوالات یعنی این مبلغ مالی رو English? Okay. I don't mind speaking in English as long as everyone listens. So as soon as I switch to Farsi, I don't want people talking about between themselves. Otherwise, could somebody, would you sit down, please? The question is with regard to the concept of khums in Islam, which is 1/5 of the net profit at the end of the year, where the wealthy individuals are responsible to separate and then spend on the poor, the needy within the community. The person who asked the question is asking whether we need permission from a particular scholar or no, we can spend it and automatically will be considered to be part of khums. If you want it to be part of khums, then you need to ask the scholar to say, look, give me permission. And normally most Islamic centers can approach multiple scholars and get permission from them that if we collect khums, we would be given the opportunity to spend it on the need of the community first before we send it anywhere else. And they have given these permission. In at least in 1 or 2 places in Michigan, I've seen when you go into the mosque, a copy of these letters from the grand scholars are there giving permission to the center to collect khums and spend it on the need that exists. But if you, as a philanthropist, has nothing to do with the concept of khums, as a philanthropist you want to spend money and support the center, no, you don't need to ask anybody's permission. As long as you do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's fine. It's only with regard, it's similar with the tax. If you want to spend some money for a charitable or organization, the tax would say, I give you a certain permission and you need to tell me where you're going to spend it. But as a philanthropist, whatever is left for you, whether it's Rockefeller Foundation or Ford Foundation or anybody else's foundation, or the computer giants that they have these spending money, they don't need to ask anybody for it. As long as you have fulfilled your legal requirement, that's as far as it goes. So if you want to spend part of the money and identify it as khums, you need to get permission. Or, better still, anticipate this and approach a number of scholars and get the permission from them and keep it at the center, say Ayatollah Sistani and few scholars in Iran, where most of the congregation follows, and then have them at the center for them to see it for themselves, and then they complete a contribution. They would define, or at least say that half of it you can spend on this, and the other half you can send, or you can spend the whole amount, but you need to get that permission. We go to the brothers. There's one here.
Assalamu alaikum. I was hoping you could compare and contrast Western and Islamic concepts and ideals around manhood and masculinity, as well as womanhood and femininity.
How much time do I have? I said that simple questions. The question is masculinity and femininity from an Islamic point of view. Well, let's start with the basic concept. There are certainly a number of traditions, and By the way, by now, scholars have begun writing about these issues. The issue of gender in Islam, sexuality and the sensuality in Islam, the issue of manhood and so on. The first person that I remember began talking about this was way before the Islamic Revolution in Iran. There was a well-known speaker, a Falsafi, who had a couple of lectures on this particular issue. We have a number of ahadith that have become the sources of books and articles, clearly defines manhood and womanhood separate from each other as an individual, and manhood and womanhood when they come together to form a partnership. When it comes to individual, there is no difference. Gender doesn't play a role. Verses in the Holy Quran makes it clear. Sisters, please. This is the curse of the iPhone. When it comes to individual, Islam does not make distinction as far as gender. The verses in the Holy Quran, a number of verses, clearly defines that both have similar responsibilities. They are both accountable to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their deeds, and they will be accountable for what they have done. The problem, or what perceived to be problem, when they combine together to constitute the nucleus of a family, and they form a partnership, then in an ideal circumstance, there are some what we call delegation of responsibility. And it should not be interpreted as inferiority or superiority of one against the other, but simply as a perception, a worldview that says a partnership that divides responsibilities, and it would survive much better and will fulfill its role in upbringing children in a much better way than when, say, both are pulling the string in different directions. The basis for coming together should be on, according again to verses in the Holy Quran and tradition, concept of love should dictate the relationship and respect. And to understand that one complements the other. Based on that, were some critiques about Islamic ideal way of life or the delegation of responsibility, is that they really have missed the point because they have not looked at the basic foundation that Islam requires for the coming together under this holy matrimony or joint partnership. Islam considers that the foundation must be constant with love and affection. They are supposed to complement each other, and at the same time they are, like the discussion that we had last night and the night before, the foundation of this relationship must be God-centric, fulfilling the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, masculinity, the unique character, there is a book, I think it was Berkhoff or somebody who wrote it, says men's are from Mars and women's from Venus. It became part of the psychoanalytical approach to the whole relationship between men and women. When you read it, clearly defines that inherently, characteristically, there are differences between men and women. The way they are attracted to each other, the way they are repulsed from each other, what they consider to be the basis of beauty, what they consider to be the basis of, or the absence of beauty. What are the ideals that each one struggles to capture? Men are looking for something, women are totally different. So, based on these physical and spiritual dimensions, or in what we call physiological dimension, there are certain rules in Islam that differentiate. There is a third component that we have to add to this, misinterpretation of few of the verses in the Holy Quran, that somehow it gives the power to men to be violent in their relationship with their partner. There is no such thing. Because if these were permitted, it would contradict that love and compassion the compatibility concept that Islam considers it as the prerequisite to coming together. The clear challenge came many years ago when an Iranian scholar in Germany was informed that a German judge, a couple took this domestic violence to the judge and the Egyptian couple, and the husband appealed to this verse in the Holy Quran, Surah An-Nisa, that you can hit your wife. And basic superficial interpretation interpreted for the judge was more lenient towards the man rather than the legal protection that he should have given the woman. The scholar of Hamburg Mosque, which is a Shia scholar, wrote back a very critical response to the judge, that these people who interpret it this way, that somehow legitimize domestic violence, really have no understanding of the text. And once we contextualize these words that exist in the Holy Quran, it does not indicate that you can hit anybody. There is no such thing as free violence towards somebody else without consequences. The only time where Islam permits violence to be committed as a punishment for a legal violation. And it has to be before a judge, not an individual. So the masculinity and femininity from an individualistic point of view, Islam considers them to be the same. Both have similar responsibilities. You will be questioned equally for your goods and criticized for your bad. Where the challenge lies and some critique exists is what happens when these two individuals that's supposed to be equal and respected equally come together, suddenly something changes. Primarily it's because the legal interpretation has not been understood properly. And by the way, there are a number of scholars that have begun writing about this. The first one that wrote was Marhum Mutahari in the late 1960s and early 1970s, a book called Huquq al-Zan dar Islam, or Right of Women in Islam, which has been translated in English, French, and a number of other languages. And a number of scholars have been writing about it. It has become the source of debate in academia, particularly in the West. How masculinity is defined, how femininity is defined in a secular context or a religious context. There are scholars that are collaborating with other religious scholars, Catholics and Protestants and so on, regarding this particular issue. How do we define it, what we have in common and so on. But from an Islamic point of view, as an individual, Islam is gender blind. When they come together, it's still gender blind, but it may prescribe certain rulings that are part of what we call delegation of responsibilities, rather than interpreted as a superior or inferiority of one against the other. You want to ask another? دو تا سوال، یکی مسئله حجاب، یکی مسئله روزه در روز عاشوراست. من چون دائما اصرار دارم برادران و خواهران به کتاب مراجعه بکنن، لذا یک کتابی رو بازم کتاب مرحوم مطهری به نام حجاب در اسلام، برید اون رو مطالعهش بکنید. در خود مسئله حقوق زن در اسلام ایشون یک بحثایی رو داره. حجاب به عنوان وظیفه شرعی الان یک بحث مفصل اکادمی هم شده. اینا رو میتونید برید مثلا در سایت های مختلف اینا رو مطالعه بکنید، اما ترجیح میدم که شما مراجعه کنید به همین حجاب در اسلام، حداقل جواب این سوال ها داده شده. در مسئله روزه در روز عاشورا، یکی از برنامه‌هایی رو که بنی امیه در برابر قیام عاشورا به پا کرد، برنامه تبلیغاتی این بود که آثار عاشورا رو به یک شکل از بین ببره و از بین بردن آثار عاشورا من جمله یکی از کارهایی که کردن این بود که یک سری روایاتی رو جعل کردن که روزه گرفتن در این روز واجبه و جزء اون نه عزاداری نمی کنن بلکه جشن میگیرن، حنا میزنن و غذاهای مخصوص درست میکنن و این جزء اون برنامه است. در مقابل اونها برای اینکه طرفداران اهل بیت این نکته رو متوجه بشن، مسئله کراهت مؤکد دربارش هست که این در روز ماه مبارک، درست در روز دهم شما غذا نمیخواید بخورید، نخورید. بعد از ظهر عاشورا با خوردن حالا یا آب تربت یا یه مقدار آب میتونید روزه رو، یعنی روزه نمیتونید بگیرید، خودتون رو نگه دارید، اما روزه برای جوابگویی و مبارزه با اون تبلیغات منفی که برای اون مهیه کرده بودن میگن جایز نیست. این روی مسئله بحث چیزاست. خواهرمون پشت.
ببخشید سوال من در مورد دختران 9 سال که در آمریکا باید حجاب بپوشن، سوال من این بودش که توی مدرسه اگر اذیت بشن و نذاریم بپوشن، مادر اینجا حکمش چه؟ یعنی گناه برای ما هستش؟ شما میگیم فشار میاد بهشون و نمیخوایم که حجاب بپوشن تا به سنی برسن که درک بکنن که چرا حجاب میپوشن. اگر مسئله و فلسفه حجاب سوال نبود.
اگر مسئله روی مبنا، یعنی قاعده کلی این خصوص حجاب نیست، در حق عمل واجب. اگر شما نگاه کنید دو راه دارید، دو تا مسئله کاملا جداست. در آمریکا من بعید میدونم، یعنی تا به حال ندیدم که کسی بیاد متعرض دختری بشه روی مبنای حجابش. اگر همچنین چیزی بشه شما راههایی رو دارید که میتونید جلوش رو بگیرید و خیلی به راحت با مدرسه و با ایژوکیشن دپارتمنت این حرفا رو دنبالش میشه گرفت. این کارها رو در بقیه جاها کردن. حالا بر فرض ما بیایم این پیش فرضیه رو بگیریم که در مواردی باشه که شخص جانش در خطر اگر اومد حجاب رو پوشه. اینها میشه قاعده های استثنایی. قاعده های استثنایی همیشه ما در قواعد فقهیمون حالت این نکته هست که اگر یک قاعده استثنایی وجود بیاد، استثناء حکم خودش رو داره، نه اینکه به عنوان یک قاعده کلی در بیاد. مشکلی که من در این مسئله دارم که با توجه به اینکه راههای قانونی هست، یک دختر بچه میتونه بره مدرسه و حجابش رو بپوشه، هیچ مشکلی هم نداشته باشه. بر فرض وقتی که ما میگیم تا وقتی که درک فکری رو پیدا بکنه، این چه وقت خواهد بود که درک فکری پیدا بکنه؟ یک محدوده ای نیست. مرحله دوم این که بچه‌ای که در اون مرحله‌های ابتدایی که بایستی خورده آشناش می‌کردن با روش و منطق، این امشب دربارش یه بحث کوچیکی خواهد شد، با روش و منطق اسلام که به پدر و مادر به عنوان رول نمونه براش هستن، اگر این به اصطلاح فتح باب شد و آزاد گذاشتنش و یه توجیهی هم براش معین شد، تا به حال برگشت به نقطه اصلی دیگه نبود. دائما شما بایستی این نکته رو در نظر داشته باشید که اگر اومدیم الان در یک چنین شرایطی جلو بچه رو آزاد گذاشتید و گفتید لازم نیست یک توجیه شرعی هم یا یک براش درست کردیم، بعدن که به سن 15 16 17 رسید، خواهش ذاتیش طوریست که دیگه نمیخواد بیاد برگرده به این مسئله. این ترس همیشه هست. لذا اگر شما بتونید برنامه‌تون رو طوری بریزید که این مسائل رو در نظر بگیرید، اون وقت اون مشکلی نخواهد. Yes, the question was with regard to the concept of hijab. What will happen if a mother or parents decide that for the sake of protecting their children or being attacked or marginalized or ignored or something, if they would permit the girl not to wear hijab when she goes to school? I challenge the basis or the thesis of the argument that in the United States at least, or in other European countries, the concept of freedom, France exception, but the concept of freedom, one could argue that includes the freedom to dress as you like. And you can really take the issue up with the principal and even the Board of Education and force the issue. So that's not the concern. My concern is, let us assume, for the sake of argument, that such an exceptional circumstance exists. Naturally, there are exceptional rules for the exceptional circumstances. But what concerns me most is if we, at the young age, that children or girls look up to the parents to see their pattern of behavior, their code of dress, and they try to imitate it, at that critical time, we open a door, give them the option, with an excuse, a justification, until you become blessed, until you become somehow intellectually capable. And then you start doing it. Well, when is this intellectual capability? How can you expect a child that at the age of 16 or 17, when it's being pulled, the girl is being pulled by physical needs now, to go back a few steps and stop wearing hijab? I'm yet to see this return to the base, so if one would call it, and say, okay, I have reached that point, and from now on, how am I going to do it? It's not going to happen. Let's face it and deal with this in the way it should be done. Art is strong.
That we might get confused if it's true.
Exactly. Because right from the beginning, parents try to present the law as it is. We conform because these are the requirements. And then suddenly, at the moment when the boy or a girl wants or should be prepared to face the responsibility properly, you will come up with justification to escape or create this exceptional circumstance. Then it becomes problematic coming back to the point.
حاج آقای یه 5 دقیقه میخواد بره بیرون یه خود نفسی یه کلیپ هم آقا شامیدان هست میذارن اگر شما یه خستگی شما بله 5 minutes just a break and then because he's going to have a test of little water and just نفسی آماده بکنم دوباره.
Well, there is a perception in our community that sheikhs don't take breaks.
Just 5 minutes. So we are going to start at 4:30.